the impeachment inquiry into President Trump is ramping up. Last night, Ukraine confirmed it will revisit cases involving the energy company that's been linked to Hunter Biden, the son of former Vice President Joe Biden. And this comes as the president publicly suggested yesterday that China should also open investigations into the Bidens. And he also tweeted about the controversial request, writing that he has the absolute right to ask countries to investigate corruption. So our Paula Reid is at the White House with more on what we're learning about a call with China's president.
China should start an investigation into the Bidens.
While facing an impeachment inquiry for privately asking Ukraine to investigate a political rival, the president publicly invited China to do the same.
What happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine.
It is illegal to accept help from a foreign entity in a U.S. election.
This is deeply, deeply troubling.
Mr. Trump has repeatedly claimed that former Vice President Joe Biden's son Hunter profited from business dealings in China while his father was in office. Companies associated with the younger Biden have done business in China over the past decade, but there is no evidence he made a profit or that his father traded favors to help him. President Trump also did not mention how his two sons are in charge of the Trump Organization, which continues to do business in dozens of countries, and his daughter Ivanka, despite working in the White House, continues to do business in China. As for his call with the Ukrainian president that launched the impeachment inquiry, the president not only defended it, he doubled down.
If they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens.
And Ukraine's prosecutor general announced today it would be reviewing cases having to do with the energy firm linked to Hunter Biden, though they noted they have no evidence of wrongdoing.
So Paula Reid is joining me now from the White House, and Ed O'Keefe is joining me from Capitol Hill. Paula, I want to talk to you about China. Ed, we'll talk about these text messages that were released overnight. But you two know that if you have anything to say about either topic, just chime in. But we're going to start with you, Paula. What more are we learning about this call with China's president in June?
Well, in this call, Anne-Marie, the president reportedly brought up his political rivals, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren. And they were mentioned in the context of the ongoing trade war, with the president suggesting that China would get a better deal with him in office, as opposed to either of these two. There's no evidence that the president was pressuring China to investigate Biden or anyone else, or there was any quid pro quo. But there are questions about what happened after the call, because the records of this call were stored in the same secure system where the records of his call with the leader of Ukraine, that's of course at the center of this impeachment inquiry, where those records were stored. So it seems that the big question this morning is what else is in this secure system? Because in terms of him bringing up his political rivals, even though the White House did not confirm any of these reports, they argued, they said, look, this morning he called publicly on China to investigate the Bidens. They weren't sure what all the fuss was about. But there are a lot of outstanding questions today about why this call was placed in the secure system and what other calls are in there as well.
Completely. So all we're sort of hearing from the White House is what's the hubbub about?
Exactly. No one would confirm this. They also didn't come out with a statement correcting it. Instead, what they do is try to tamp it down by comparing what was reportedly in this call to what the president had said publicly earlier yesterday, which is he directly called on China to investigate the Bidens, which is pretty surprising and certainly not normal for the leader of the free world to call on a foreign country to investigate a U.S. citizen and former vice president.
Indeed. So, Ed, we want to talk to you about these text messages that were released late last night by the House committees. They were given to Congress by Kurt Volker, the former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine. He testified in front of the committee. What did we learn from the text messages? I know there were a lot, but there's some highlights in there.
Sure. The top line, essentially, Anne-Marie, is that administration officials in these texts are seen essentially coaching Ukrainian officials on what to say and do in order to secure a meeting with President Trump. Specifically, that they should go after that, or not go after, but investigate that Ukrainian energy company with ties to Hunter Biden. But in at least one of these chains, there's one U.S. diplomat, Bill Taylor, a guy who's been in the Foreign Service for 20 years and is currently the top envoy in Ukraine for the United States, raising concerns about whether that request for an investigation should be tied to releasing the military aid that Ukraine was expecting. There's also examples in there of various diplomats, including Volker, in text messages with Rudy Giuliani, talking about aspects of all of this, specifically, again, coaching Ukrainian officials on what exactly to do, and also some evidence that Volker raised doubts about the veracity of the information that Giuliani was receiving from Ukrainian officials, essentially trying to stop this in some ways, but also evidence that they were doing what the president wanted, which was putting pressure on Ukrainian officials to look into this. So that came after more than 9 hours of testimony by Ambassador Volker, a pretty intense day for him. He had met behind closed doors with staffers for the House Intelligence, Foreign Affairs, and Oversight committees, and a few members of those committees. Remember, we're in the midst of a 2-week recess, so not every member of those committees was here. And today, the watchdog for the intelligence community is back up here talking to the Intelligence Committee behind closed doors about everything he knows about the whistleblower, that July call, and the whole mess that got this started.
Yeah, and you got to wonder if there's going to be any sort of additional documentation to back it up, because those text messages were pretty interesting reading. So, Paula, is the White House reacting to Volker's testimony, the release of these text messages at all?
So far, no. What we do expect, though, is later today there will be a letter sent to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi informing her that the White House does not intend to cooperate with any of lawmakers' demands until there is a formal vote on the House floor, making this an official impeachment inquiry. Now, we've been reporting this for weeks, all week, because I've been talking to various members of his legal team. But here they want to put her on notice. In many ways, they're sort of daring her to formalize this impeachment inquiry with a vote. But they are not necessarily responding to the tit for tat going on the Hill this week.
And Anne-Marie, yes. And Anne-Marie, to that point, that is not only a separation of powers issue, but more notably and potentially more interestingly, that's a political move. Because there are about 31 House Democrats who represent districts across the country that the president won in 2016. And what the president and the White House and Republicans are trying to do is force an up or down vote on whether this impeachment inquiry should be launched in a more formal way.
Right. Force
those 31 Democrats to take a vote so that Republicans can turn around and run ads saying, Congresswoman or Congressman, whatever, is more focused on impeaching the president than he is on fixing your health care, reviving the economy, working on tax reform with Republicans. So it's a double-edged attempt here, and one that's been anticipated, as Paula said, on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. Pelosi continues to insist she doesn't need to do it because previous impeachment proceedings, not just against presidents but other government officials, didn't necessarily begin with that kind of up or down vote.
Oh, yeah, that is interesting. Ed, the House Oversight Committee is expected to subpoena the White House today. What are they looking for, and what do they really expect to come out of this?
That's right. As one letter comes up here, another letter heads back to the White House. In this case, it's the Oversight Committee saying, give us all the information on that July call between the president and the Ukrainian leader. And not only that, any attempts to cover up the call and any attempts since then to learn about who this whistleblower is and potentially discredit this person. This is a request that was made of the White House in recent days in a less formal way. The subpoena designed to force the issue, but as Paula points out, the White House is likely going to ignore this unless or until the House takes a formal up or down vote on launching the impeachment inquiry.
Right, because though, the White House released that sort of partial transcript, there's some ellipses in there, ... There's some gaps. We don't know what was said, and I'm sure a lot of people want to take a look at that. Paula, Ed, thank you very much.
Take care.
So, want to keep track of all of this? For the latest developments on this story, you can follow along on our live blog. Just head to cbsnews.com/impeachment.